So good afternoon, everyone. We are reading in Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, Canto 3, the Yoga of the Soul's Release. And we've come to the section where Sri Aurobindo explains to us that although King Asvapati is having very, very high experiences, at first these heavenlier states only last a short time. And he explained to us that this is because there's something in the being which can't always remain on a higher level. The lower nether members, they get tired of peace, and they need to rest. He says it's like a child who's learning to walk. He can't walk for a long time. He has to rest in a natural pose of fall. So that is what happens to us also when we try to rise into contact with our higher being. There's a pull of subconscious cords that drags us down, or it's like the earth's gravity pulling us back down to the blind, driven inertia of our base. And then he told us that the supreme diplomat, the Lord, can make use of this necessity, because if we do contact something higher, when we come back to our normal selves, something of that higher consciousness comes down with us and does its work, hidden by the darkness of our lower nature. And then he told us that everything here has to learn to obey a higher law. It's not only that the spirit alone should be purified and escape. If it were like that, that would mean that the earth could never be transformed. So he describes this process as an oscillation. Usually we think of oscillations for the pendulum of a clock. It's moving from one point to another. But in the same way, he says there's an oscillation from the higher levels to the lower and back again. And so he says, in this oscillation between earth and heaven and back to earth again, there grew in him, in King Asvapati, like a moon in the first part of the month, when it is growing bigger and bigger every day, a waxing moon. There grew in King Asvapati the glory of the wholeness of his soul. So it might have started just as a thin crescent moon, but gradually it becomes full and complete and gloriously luminous. I think that's where we stopped, line 491 on page 35. So I will read on from there for a page or so, and then we'll go back and look at each sentence in detail. A union of the real with the unique. A gaze of the alone from every face. The presence of the eternal in the hours, widening the mortal mind's half look on things, bridging the gap between man's force and fate, made whole the fragment being we are here. At last was won a firm spiritual poise, a constant lodging in the Eternal's realm, a safety in the silence and the ray, a settlement in the immutable. His heights of being lived in the still self. His mind could rest on a supernal ground and look down on the magic and the play where the God-child lies on the lap of night and dawn, and the everlasting puts on time's disguise. To the still heights and to the troubled depths, his equal spirit gave its vast ascent, a poised serenity of tranquil strength, a wide, unshaken look on time's unrest, faced all experience with unaltered peace. Indifferent to the sorrow and delight, untempted by the marvel and the call, immobile it beheld the flux of things, calm and apart, supported all that is. His spirit's stillness helped the toiling world. Inspired by silence and the closed eye's sight, his force could work with a new luminous art on the crude material from which all is made, and the refusal of inertia's mass, and the grey front of the world's ignorance, and nescient matter, and the huge error of life. As a sculptor chisels a deity out of stone, he slowly chipped off the dark envelope, line of defense of nature's ignorance, the illusion and mystery of the inconscient, in whose black ball the Eternal wraps his head, that he may act unknown in cosmic time. A splendor of self-creation from the peaks, a transfiguration in the mystic depths, a happier cosmic working could begin, and fashion the world shape in him anew. God found in nature, nature fulfilled in God. The birds are so happy. There's been a little rain. You will start, Suresh, line 492.
The unity of the real is the unity, a gaze of the above from every place. The presence of the eternal in the hours, widening the mortal mind's half-loop of things, on things, but bridging the gap between man's force and self. Made whole the present being we are here.
Yes. So as King Aswapati's soul grows full like a waxing moon, what happens that he experiences a union of the real, of the supreme reality with the unique, all the differences of the manifestation. He sees the alone, the one, the supreme, gazing from every face. The Lord is inhabiting everything, looking out through all eyes. He feels, Aswapati feels the presence of the eternal in the hours. When we say this word eternal or eternity, we think of some state that is beyond time. But Aswapati is able to experience that eternity, and the eternal being is inhabiting all the hours of human time. So those experiences widen his way of looking at things, the way that our human mind, our mortal mind of a being which must die one day, which is subject to death and ignorance, our way of looking at things. In Aswapati, it gets widened, and it bridges, it makes a connection across the gap between man's force, our human capacities and strength, and fate, whatever great cosmic force that is, which is determining the way that things happen in the world. So through those experiences, this fragment being, this small, divided being, this separate being that we feel ourselves to be, which is also made up of many fragments, of many small pieces. In Aswapati, it becomes one whole, one perfect whole, made whole. The fragment being we are here, we human beings. He started off as a fragment being, although with many great inner capacities. But now, through these experiences that he's been having, his inner being has grown more and more complete and integral. Yes,
can you explain a little? I didn't understand the gap between man's force and fate.
You didn't understand this, yes. I'm not sure that I can really explain it properly. But what is fate? We feel that fate is what we can't change. There's certain determinisms in the cosmos that we are helpless about it. That is just fate, and what can we do? And our human force is so small and weak compared with that great cosmic force of fate. But through these experiences that he's having, and the widening of mortal mind, the way that it looks at things, in his consciousness, he begins to see that there's a connection between our human force and that universal force. There's like a bridge between the two. Does it help?
It could be like in both directions.
Definitely, it works in both directions. That's one thing that we are often not sure about. No? It's interesting that scientists who think about this, mathematicians, they have a sense of something that's fixed, of something like eternal laws, which are beyond our capacity to change. And then they wonder, those laws affect us. Is there any way that we can affect them? But there's several places in Savitri when Sri Aurobindo says that yes, there is a connection between the three aspects of the divine. The transcendent aspect, which is beyond time and space, infinite and eternal. The universal aspect, which even seems far too vast for us little individualized human beings. But in fact, every individual being is a projection, an expression, both of the transcendent and of the universal. So there is a connection. And there's a wonderful chapter in The Life Divine where Sri Aurobindo says that the Supreme Lord doesn't think so little of us. He doesn't think that we are so small and unimportant. Each of us has a role to play in the universe. So who is next? Alice. At last, yes.
At last was won a firm spiritual poise, a constant lodging in the eternal's realm, a safety in the silence and the ray, a settlement in the immutable.
So this section began by saying that at first those heavenly estates only lasted a while for King Asvapati. But now Sri Aurobindo is telling us that through these experiences and through this oscillation between earth and heaven, at last in Asvapati is won a firm spiritual poise. It's not oscillating anymore. It's not shaky and feeble. It is a firm poise, a firm base. No? He's able to live constantly in the eternal's realm, in a part of his being. He's experiencing a safety in the silence and the ray, the silent heights and that light of the higher consciousness. It's not that he contacts them and then he just becomes ordinary again. There's a settlement. He gets a settled, fixed state in the immutable, in that state which does not change, the permanence. And in the lines which follow, Sri Aurobindo is going to describe what that fixed poise is like. Kamala.
His heights of being lived in the still self. His mind could rest on the supernal ground and look down on the magic and the play, where the God child lies on the lap of night and dawn, and the everlasting puts and time Jesus.
These guys. Yes. So the higher levels of Asvapati's being, they lived constantly in the still self, the silent self above the mind. And his mind could rest. I don't know, one can imagine him, the mind resting as if on some high cloud and looking down, could rest on this supernal ground, this high, firm ground, and look down on what is happening here, on the magic and the play here, where the God-child is being nursed but in the lap of the duality, of the alternation of night and dawn. These are two sisters who nurse the God-child growing in the world. And here in our world, where the everlasting puts on the disguise of a being who lives in time. On his heights and the transcendent level, he's everlasting. When he expresses himself in all of us beings in time, he disguises himself. No? The everlasting puts on time's disguise. All of us, if we could really know it, we're carrying the everlasting in us, disguised as us mortal beings who are in the grip of ignorance and death. Mila.
To the still heights and to the troubled depths, his equal spirit gave its vast ascent, a poised serenity of tranquil strength, a wide, unshaken look on time's unrest, faced all experience with unaltered peace.
So his spirit has achieved equality. It's one of the basic realizations of yoga, of being able to look with equal eyes on everything and not be disturbed by anything. And this state of equality is so beautifully described in these lines. His equal spirit is saying yes to everything, because in him there's this poised serenity. Such a lovely word. Something that's serene is not only still, it's also smiling, a slight smile. A poised serenity of tranquil strength. There's strength there. There has to be strength to look on everything with vast ascent. But it's a tranquil strength, full of peace. And he's able to look on all the unrest, all the disturbances of the world, in this world of time, with a wide, unshaken look that faces all experience with unaltered peace. Savitri is full of mantras, but When I read this sentence, I always think of my own beloved mentor, Amal Kiran, and this was one of his mantras. This was the state he was always aspiring for. A wide, unshaken look on time's unrest. The capacity to remain absolutely tranquil and undisturbed, whatever the disturbances going on around. And in his life he had to face many disturbances, but some of this serenity he had achieved. Mochi, you'll read?
Indifferent?
Yes.
Indifferent to the sorrow and delight, and tempted by the marvel and the call, immobile it beheld the influx of things, calm and apart, supported all that is. His spirit's stillness helped the toiling world.
Yes. So this is a high spiritual state. Not feeling any preference either for the delight or any repulsion by the sorrow, indifferent to the sorrow and delight, seeing everything equally, untempted, not attracted by the marvel and the call of this magical play. His spirit has become immobile, and it simply watches the flow of things, the flux of things. And the word flux means flow, but it also suggests flowing out and flowing back. So in this way, his spirit is able to support everything that is, to say yes to everything, calm and apart, without disturbance. And in that way, his spirit's stillness helped the toiling world, this world of effort and striving. It contributed its calm, steady peace to support everything that's going on in the toiling world. Something else happened, another development happened in him. You will read?
Inspired by silence and the closed eyes sight, his force could work with a new luminous art on the crude material from which all is made, and the refusal of inertia's mass, and the grey front of the world's ignorance, and nascent matter, and the huge error of light.
Yes. So in that state of calm spirit, he's able to be inspired by the higher silence and what he sees with closed eyes in the subtle worlds. So his force, the force of his consciousness, was able to work in a new way, with a new luminous art, a skill full of light, on this crude material from which all is made, on matter. He was able to work on matter with the force of his consciousness. He could work on this refusal of inertia's mass, the inertness of matter, which is also in us, in our our bodies, there's something inert that doesn't respond. He's able to work on that refusal. And he's able to work on this grey front of the world's ignorance, that state of ignorance that the world is in at present presents such a grey face to the spirit. But he's able to do some work on that. He can work on nescient matter, matter which has no knowledge, and he can work on the huge error of life. Life which is struggling and striving and looking for better things, but which is always going astray because of these things, because of the refusal of inertia's mass and the crude material from which all is made. He's able, his force could work on all those obstacles and hindrances.
What is the huge error of life?
Well, it's almost as if life itself is an error. No, it's going so wrong all the time compared with the spiritual perfection.
But it seems it refers to one error.
Well, life as a whole. This aspect of error, of endless mistakes, and this huge error of life, it has baffled so many spiritual seekers, and they've thought that actually it's not possible to do anything about it, and that the only thing to do is to withdraw from life completely if they want to enjoy the bliss and peace of the higher consciousness. But Sri Aurobindo insists that the real aim of spiritual development is to be able to work on the huge error of life. So that's what Asvapati is starting to do now. Would you read, Joel?
As a sculptor chisels a deity out of stone, he slowly chipped off the dark envelope, line of defense of nature's ignorance, the illusion and mystery of the inconscient, in whose black hole the eternal wraps his head, that he may act unknown in cosmic time.
Do you grasp this image? It's so nice. There's a story, I don't know where this story comes from, of a child watching a sculptor make a figure, and asking him when he saw the figure, whatever it was, a beautiful woman or a bird, how did you know it was there? So it's like that. Asvapati is working on his own being, as if he's covered in hard stone, in the same way as a sculptor, chiseling, working away until he has the form of a god, an idol, a divine being. So Asvapati is doing that on his own being, slowly chipping off this dark envelope which is covering up the God within. He says, Sri Aurobindo says, this dark envelope is nature's line of defense, defending its present ignorant state. It's made up of the illusion and mystery of the inconscient, which is such a mystery to us. This inconscient, which is our base, this state of without consciousness. But here Sri Aurobindo says that the eternal has deliberately wrapped his head, covered himself up with this black pall. A pall is a heavy cloth, a thick, usually black or purple cloth. And it's the cloth that we lay over a coffin when somebody is to be buried, as a pall. So it's as if the divine has disguised himself in this heavy covering of darkness so that he can act unknown in cosmic time, in universal time. He's deliberately disguised himself. It's not a mistake. It has happened on purpose. But nevertheless, he encourages us to gradually chip off this dark covering to find him within ourselves. Lela.
A splendor of self-creation from the peaks, a transfiguration in the mystic depths, a happier cosmic working could begin and fashion the world shape in him now, in him and you. God found in nature, nature fulfilled in God.
This is the work that he is doing. It's as if he's creating himself with the help of the divine. This splendor of self-creation coming from the high levels, the peaks, and in the mystical depths, in the darkness, there's a transfiguration, a change of shape and appearance into something more divine. In him, a happier cosmic working, a universal working could begin. Usually what is moving us and helping us to grow gradually is the working of cosmic nature, which is not always happy, which is often progressing through pain and suffering and strife. But now, through this collaboration, this happier cosmic working could begin. And the world shape, this kind of world shape that each of us wears, could begin to change, to be refashioned, reshaped. And the aim, the ultimate achievement would be the revelation of God in nature and the fulfillment of nature and all the efforts of nature in union with God. Sarojini?
Already in him was seen that dusk of power. Life made its home on the high tops of self. His soul, mind, heart become a single song. Only life's low reaches remained real.
Yes. So in Asvapati, already at this stage, could be seen that task of revelation of God in nature and nature fulfilled in God. In him, the life force made its home, lived naturally and comfortably on the high tops of self, on the higher levels of consciousness, so that his soul, his mind, his heart became a single sun. Mother has made a beautiful sketch of these lines. These are the higher parts of the natural being, or the soul, the mind, the heart. All these become a single sun, a shining, warm light full of energy and creative power. Only life's lower reaches, the lower levels, they remain dim. They haven't become sun-like yet. Chandra.
But there too, in the uncertain shadow of life, there was a level and a fairy break.
Fiery.
Fiery break.
Yes.
The ambitious goal, celestial essence, was watched by the inner, witness numerous things.
Yes. So even in the lower reaches of life, in the uncertain shadow of life, the lower parts of the being, something is going on. There's a labor, a fiery breath. There's an energy working. And what is it? It is the celestial puissance, the heavenly power at work. But that heavenly power has cowled itself, disguised itself, so that we can't understand what it is doing. But it is being watched by the inner witnesses, moveless peace, that silent, observing spirit, watching everything that's going on and saying yes to it. Subho?
Even on the struggling nature felt below, strong period of illumination came, lightning of glory after glory world. Experience was a trail of flames and fire, air rippled round the elbows of the god. Strange reaches sailed to him from the unseen splendors of insight fade, the grant of thought. Knowledge spoke to the inconscient stillness, river cold, dawn of bliss, and luminous foam, visit of beauty, storm, sweep of delight, ray from the all-powerful mystery gold.
Yes, above, yes. So, because of that celestial puissance working in disguise in the lower levels of the nature, even in this struggling nature that's left below when life is making its home on the high tops of self, strong periods of illumination came. From time to time, light would come and shine on the struggling nature. And then he experiences lightnings, flashes of lightning, glory after glory burned. And experience, everyday experience, becomes a tale, like a wonderful adventure story, a tale of blaze, of intense heat and light. Air rippled round the argosies of the gods. Argosies are ships that carry treasure ships. The origin of the word is the name of a city on the coast of Italy, Ragusa, where they manufactured or gathered all kinds of luxury goods, and their beautiful ships sailed around the Mediterranean supplying these things. So Sri Aurobindo has used this word here. It's as if ships are bringing to Aswapati strange riches, sailing to him from the unseen, from the invisible worlds. He doesn't see where they're coming from, but they're bringing him wonderful gifts. And then there's a list of what some of those wonderful gifts were. Splendors of insight filled the blank of thought. If the thought became blank and silent, wonderful gifts of insight, of understanding came. Knowledge spoke to the inconscient stillnesses when the lower parts of the being have become quiet. Knowledge can communicate to them. And from above, there's rivers of energy pouring down, rivers of bliss and luminous force. He feels these powerful rivers of energy pouring into him. Wonderful, beautiful things come and visit him. And sometimes it's as if he's caught up in such an intense experience of delight. It's as if he's in a whirlwind or a cyclone or something. It's such a strong experience. All these things pouring down like rain from the all-powerful mystery above. I think we'll stop there today. A union of the real with the unique, a gaze of thee alone from every face, the presence of the eternal in the hours, widened the mortal mind's half look on things, bridging the gap between man's force and fate. Made whole, the fragment being, we are here. At last was won a firm spiritual poise, a constant lodging in the Eternal's realm, a safety in the silence and the ray, a settlement in the immutable. His heights of being lived in the still self. His mind could rest on a supernal ground and look down on the magic and the play where the God-child lies on the lap of night and dawn, and the everlasting puts on time's disguise. To the still heights and to the troubled depths, his equal spirit gave its vast ascent. A poised serenity of tranquil strength, a wide, unshaken look on time's unrest, faced all experience with unaltered peace. Indifferent to the sorrow and delight, untempted by the marvel and the call, immobile it beheld the flux of things. Calm and apart, supported all that is. His spirit's stillness helped the toiling world. Inspired by silence and the closed eye's sight, his force could work with a new luminous art on the crude material from which all is made, and the refusal of inertia's mass, and the grey front of the world's ignorance, and nescient matter, and the huge error of life. As a sculptor chisels a deity out of stone, he slowly chipped off the dark envelope, line of defense of nature's ignorance, the illusion and mystery of the inconscient, in whose black pall the Eternal wraps his head that he may act unknown in cosmic time. A splendor of self-creation from the peaks, a transfiguration in the mystic depths, a happier cosmic working could begin and fashion the world shape in him anew. God found in nature, nature fulfilled in God. Already in him was seen that task of power. Life made its home on the high tops of self. His soul, mind, heart became a single sun. Only life's lower reaches remained dim. But there too, in the uncertain shadow of life, there was a labour and a fiery breath. The ambiguous, cowled, celestial puissance worked, watched by the inner witnesses, moveless peace. Even on the struggling nature left below, strong periods of illumination came, lightnings of glory after glory burned. Experience was a tale of blaze and fire. Air rippled round the argosies of the gods. Strange riches sailed to him from the unseen. Splendors of insight filled the blank of thought. Knowledge spoke to the inconscient stillnesses. Rivers poured down of bliss and luminous force. Visits of beauty, storm sweeps of delight rained from the all-powerful mystery above.